time. Yeah, then you're just out of luck, guys. Just gonna have to learn how to use the left hand, I guess. Mhm. Mm. Margie says Stephanie and them's doing a little better, and then let's see, we've got ones that we commonly mention too that suffering different things and uh, holding on and recuperating. Billy and Harris and Danny Taylor. Uh, his situation is just kind of the way it is, uh, dealing with cancer. And let's see, Shelly, who's that? Y'all go to Nashville tomorrow? Okay. And Shelly Green. And let's see, there's Renee Stanley. That's some of Gary Nichols' family. And then Pat Mongan. And Elvis is not able to be here this evening. He's had to make a run to the doctor. He's having problems with cluster headaches, and I can relate to that. I've been there. Those things can get rough. So they're, if you don't know what that is, it's a little not the same thing as a migraine, but they can be just as bad. And when they talk about in clusters, they'll come in one, and then normally they'll come in runs of threes. Just you'll get over it just for a little bit, and then it'll come again, and then it'll come again, just like that. And it's just they can be really debilitating. But he's dealing with that, so remember that. Got to talk to Paul today. He had some things concerning his biopsy came back, and it was not as bad as they originally thought it was going to be. Everything seems to be in an early stage and not a very developed stage at that. So hopefully everything will work out well there. And so keep him in mind. Then Jana mentioned that Chris's grandmother, Pat, broke her arm. Is that what it was? Okay, a wrist. Okay. So remember them. There may be others who might need to know.
Jason may come home.
Who? Jason might come home tomorrow.
Maybe.
Okay. I forgot about him. He's not on here for some reason. Okay. But they finally figure out anything?
I think it's the infection.
Just infection?
They did a CT scan today and they hadn't heard from that yet.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Hopefully that all works out. Keep in mind our shut-ins as well, so we know from week to week that we might seem to some to be a bit redundant, but they need not to be forgotten. So keep in mind Lyndall, Virginia, and Lana, and Christy, and Sister Jimmy. And then speak of Hilda, she's right here. So good to see her up and around. She's had a rough go as well. So we're glad to see her here this evening. And Doreen, that's right. It's another one of them. I must have a list here that's a little bit old or something. It's not up to date, so I may need to make sure I get an updated one. But yeah, don't forget him too. That got it? Well, if that's the case, we'll start then here in just a moment. We'll start with a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy great, thy matchless name. We give thee thanks, O Father, for the wonderful day that we've had. We're mindful, Father, of those that are less fortunate than ourselves and not able to be here and be about their normal activities of life, those that are sick, those that we have mentioned. And we pray, Father, that all things that are being done for them will be such that their health might be returned to them, if it be thy will, and their strength might return, so they be about activities that they need to be and be back to worship again. We're grateful for the congregation of people that meets at this place and continue to look down upon us and help us to realize the responsibilities that we have and seize the opportunities to reach out to others and encourage others to come to thee. We're mindful as well, O Father, of the world in which we live and the sinful condition that it is, and help us in light of this to be the examples that we should be. Help us now as we enter into thy study, as we're thankful for thy word, that we might be able to seize upon things that would help us in our daily lives, and help us, oh Father, to grow in faith and knowledge and in love with thee and one another. Help us to always be mindful of those things which are not in keeping with thy will. Help us to acknowledge them, and that we might repent of them. And we pray, Father, that thou would look down upon us in tender mercy and forgive us when we fail thee. These things we ask in the name of Christ. Amen. 1 Samuel chapter 2 is where we pick up again this evening. We just got through looking at most of the matters regarding Hannah and circumstances here that led up to the point where now that Elkanah and Hannah have taken Samuel to Shiloh, where the tabernacle is, and he's going to be serving in the capacity of helping Eli, evidently, in the works that are surrounding the tabernacle and helping the priest and things of this nature. So whatever it is that's going to be involved, that's what's happening here. He's obviously still at a very young age right here. So it would be matters that would be, he would only be capable of doing. And I'm sure as time goes along and he begins to mature, there's going to be more things that he would be capable of undertaking. But that is where he is at this particular point. Now, when we come into verse 22 is where we are, where we're picking up. The storyline changes a bit because it's going to be dealing with the situation regarding Eli and his sons. Now, the text here states that Eli was very old, which is kind of interesting at this point, because as you get on down into the chapter and into the next chapter, then he continues to age, being around as long as he's going to be for time when Samuel begins to mature. But now that he's coming in his latter years, and the text states here, and he heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, and how they lay with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Now, I want us to note one thing to start with. If you'll note in the latter portion of the text right there, it does mention the tabernacle here. This has been kind of interesting. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because, especially when you go over into chapter 3 as well, even as we've already seen thus far, there's been the mention of the term temple a couple of times. And I'm not certain as exactly why Samuel would use those terms, except here you're looking at a situation where the tabernacle is located at Shiloh, and it's evidently going to be there for some time. So it is a settled place. I think most everybody kind of understands that, but we'll come back to that when we get into chapter 3, because like I say, it's going to touch on that terminology again, but I do want to emphasize it, because when you do see it, you're going to see temple, tabernacle, you're going to see the references here. We don't need to get so confused on that, and I don't mean for us to get lost on it right now. But we took a look at the text. As we stated, Eli's a very old man, and it states here that he had heard of his son's wicked behavior. Now, I think we might have even pointed out last week, it doesn't tell us when it was he heard it. In reading this text right here, you might get a little bit of an indication that he's just now learned of this. I don't think that's the case. I think when you get to chapter 3 as well, you're going to be able to see that there are things that God's going to mention to Samuel about the situation regarding Eli, that these are things that he would have known about. To me as well, when Hannah came to the tabernacle earlier to pray, as we saw in chapter 1, I think she's aware of the things that are going on. And I think Eli is aware of it as well, because there's activities that's evidently going on in and around the temple or the tabernacle complex at this particular point, that he is mindful of those circumstances, because when he sees Hannah, he's thinking that she's drunk. So this seems to be something that's a kind of a common situation that's been going on. I think that he's been knowledgeable about, but it mentions here specifically that he's heard all the things that the sons have been doing. And so, but anyway, I think he's known it for years. You talk about the son's wickedness. It's obvious that when you look at this text, that when we have talked about it before, there was nothing specifically that was stated about it, but it is here. And, they're involved with prostitutes have been coming to the tabernacle, and these may have been other than Israelites. We don't know if they were Israelites women or not. They may even been pagan women, may have been idol worshipers. It's the whole place is being defiled. And if in fact that these are pagan women or even some members of other races and things of this nature, that even has exacerbated the defilement. And so that's it's not stated. They could have been Jewish women. I don't know. And if that's the case as well, then what you're seeing is a clear indication of the Jews' degradation and their moral behavior. And the thing of it is that Eli has not been doing anything about it, and shouldn't have really had to do much, because these boys all known better than this anyway. And they should have been the one leading against such activities as this. But we do know that immorality was things that was some of the behavior that was involved in a lot of pagan worship. And that might have been something that they were doing here to further defile the temple. They're just turning it into a place of pagan worship and carrying it on. And these boys are allowing that to take place. So I don't know. It's a rather difficult thing to put this in any kind of perspective from the view of Eli. Why in the world, as a high priest and the judge, would he just simply overlook this stuff? That's what's hard for me to fathom. And it still makes me think that there's something in the background here that's maybe some influence that's keeping him from it. It makes you wonder about his wife. She's never mentioned, so we don't know about that. That's just pure speculation. But if that's the case, it doesn't make any difference which case it is. He's not man enough to deal with the situation. And there's where the problem is lying. He has not the spiritual fortitude, nor the, we say in the South, have the guts to go deal with his sons. Now, he may have been something in lack of health. We already know he can't be all that healthy a fellow, because he's a big old fat fella. And so he evidently doesn't have the energy, the strength that he probably needs to pick up a couple of boys by the nape of the neck and wear them out, which is what they needed doing. But these are things he should have done years before. And this is what one gets into, and that's not something that's employed. But anyway, it is what it is at this particular point. So now the situation is that you've got these fellas that are basically in charge of the workings in and around the tabernacle, and the tabernacle is just being completely defiled. All right, comment question on verse 22. Okay, verse 23 and verse 24 we're going to put together. And now this is Eli talking to the boys. And he said unto them, why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all this people. Nay, my sons, for it's no good report that I hear. You make the Lord's people transgress. Now, what's your opinion, or what do you perhaps like to posit about that particular?
Well, the moral gets back to that verse 22 again. If they're doing it even in the temple or the tabernacle, then the influence that they're having, those individuals coming and going, well, if they can do it, then I can do it, or something along that line. The decline as far as moral concern there, disregard for God's laws.
Well, that's something that has effect on the people. And he does mention that this is something that can have the effect he calls in the Lord's people to transgress. That kind of influence can do that. And but what you also see implicated here is both sides of the issue, because evidently there have been people that have been coming to him and telling him this. So why would they tell him if they're not concerned about what's going on? So you got some people that evidently know that these things shouldn't be taking place. And that's the other part of this I find also interesting as far as the narrative is concerned, because you would think that Samuel, even by inspiration, would mention something to this effect, that the people knowing what it was that was going on and they're coming to him and telling him about this, you would think also that it would mention the case that the people would say, why are you letting them get by with this? You know, and that may have been part of it, but it's just not recorded. I have a feeling that's going to be some of the things that were stated, but it's just not found within the text. Why are you doing such? One of the things I found about this that was interesting to me is something that we kind of intimated already, is this is a question that it should have been asked of them at the very beginning when he first knew about this. I'm certain of the fact that this is not the first knowledge he has of all this. These are things he ought to be dealing with at the very beginning. And in fact of the matter is, after they had got through defiling the temple in ways that they had, you're essentially coming to the point where you're blaspheming God in his place of worship. What would the law require? Something of that nature. These people could have been put to death. And he's just kind of, well, he really is not doing anything about it now.
Does it tell us they were always that way?
No, it doesn't mention that they, from the time that they were young, we don't know, but they had to be of age to be in the service of the tabernacle for these things to have taken place. So I'm sure from the point when they have become adults and are in charge really of using this, they're now abusing that power. They see the opportunity to do it. Dad's not going to do anything about it anyway. He never has done much with us. I think that's something that's already the case. In fact of the matter is, when you get, again, and we're getting ahead of ourselves, but when you get to chapter 3, you're going to see this is one of the points that the Lord's going to make. And that he had not restrained them and had not done anything to discipline them at all. And so that's when that comes to that point, from the time that they're young and now that they are in this situation, that they're in positions of adulthood and power. As far as the tabernacle is concerned, they're taking advantage of that. And then I think the conclusion is, well, he's not going to do anything about it anyway. And he has let this go so long that now when the people are coming to him and complaining about the situation, this is not a good thing to do, but he doesn't do anything otherwise about it. And being not only the high priest, but as is intimated as well, the judge, this ought to have been handled.
Why was he allowed to stay in a position he was in?
This is another part of one of the things we're going to be talking about just a little bit. He does, after this is not going to happen. This is something that is going to be undertaken by our mentioned as part of our study even tonight. Hopefully, if we get that far, I think we will. But so he just scolds them.
It was bad enough that they were doing it themselves, but they were, this commentary said that because of the way they engaged in that sinful behavior, they were causing others to sin.
Others get involved in.
By their example.
All right.
But it doesn't say what you've done to me, it just says you've offended the people,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of an odd,
Mm-hmm.
if you were yelling at me, you wouldn't be worried about offending other people.
No. No. So, I mean, it's just what this comes down to, just a mere scolding. And what you've done, you've caused the Lord's people to transgress. But when you're talking about men, fellas that have the disposition that they are, that's just going to be like water off a duck's back with them. I mean, that's so, you can kind of see that. What difference does that make?
Was he necessarily married? Was he necessarily still married, or could
Who Eli?
Yeah.
Well, we don't know. I have no idea.
It's always sounded to me like maybe she had already passed, or maybe something happened at a young age, and he had dealt with these boys on his own.
Yeah.
Maybe, and they didn't have the overseeing maybe that they should have.
Yep.
I don't know.
I mean, you can speculate on a number of different things, and speculation may be bad in some senses, but still, when you looking at an overall view right here, this is humanity. We're part of humanity. We know how typically we operate in certain situations, or we know of how others have typically operated in similar situations like this. So you kind of wonder as to how all of this had come about. But when they really require death because of their blasphemous behavior, they just get scolded a little bit. You remember when you start talking about particulars regarding the law, what happened to Uzzah? Remember Uzzah? Yeah. When the ark was on the cart and it stumbled and he didn't want it to fall, he just reached out and touched it. What happened to him? He died. God was rather specific about that. And of course, now we've got another good example of two sons of the high priest. In fact, the first high priest that there ever was, and that was Aaron, and his sons were Nadab and Abihu. And what did they do? Okay, put a strange fire, that is one that was not authorized as far as its source was concerned, and put it on the altar, and God sent fire from heaven, destroyed them. It's a wonder that a similar situation like this had not occurred. But I mean, the judgment's coming. It's just coming in a different way. But these are just some things to remember, that when there are those that have been in positions like Nadab and Abihu, they're in the very same position as Hophni and Phinehas. And perhaps not what we would consider. I mean, you try to compare the two things. I don't think it was just a mere mistake that Nadab and Abihu made. Even if it was, didn't make any difference. I mean, you think about Uzzah's circumstance, that was just it was a noble intention, to keep the ark from falling. But, the law is the law. God made a point out of it. And that's the reason why, again, I don't think Nadab and Abihu did this by mistake. They knew what it was. They put the wrong fire on, but we know what happened. But you compare the two things between what Nadab and Abihu did and what Hophni and Phinehas did. Who, in your estimation, do you consider has done the worst deeds? To me, these two did. Yeah, I'd have burned them twice. It's just, but I'm not God. And not in that position. But now he evidently has his point in dealing with them is he's going to make more of an example out of Eli. And that, I think, is what a lot of the point's going to be here. Now, you come to verse 25. He continues his scolding. If one man sinned against another, the judge shall judge him. But if a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? Notwithstanding, they hearken not to the voice of their father, because the Lord would slay them. Well, this goes back just what we were intimating a minute ago. He could tell them all these things, and what was basically their response? So, yeah, so what? Eli, of course, he's in his effort here. He's telling them they need to be mindful. You know, when a man sins against somebody else, implying that this is basically some civil matter, that the offender would appear before the magistrate who would in fact adjudicate it. And if it's something that the law required, perhaps of death, or there was some punishment or retribution that had to be made, then of course the judge would determine that. But as in this case, he's charging his sons with sinning against the Lord. And you have to understand, boys, it's going to be to him you're going to answer. And when you look at the statement, it's kind of interesting, because the reason was that Eli, as we pointed out, is not only the high priest, but he's also the judge. And his knowledge, as we've already pointed out too, of the behavior, it should have been already handled when he knew about this. But it just seems to me he just really doesn't want to deal with the matter as it should have been handled. And it may be just simply because of the fact that he has a soft spot for them because they were his sons, which I can understand to a certain degree. But they don't seem to be so concerned about him being their daddy. And they're certainly not all that concerned about the position that they're in or the place in which all of this is occurring, because they're just flaunting this in the face of God. And then you note the word there when more or less really the term notwithstanding, or therefore, really, I think is probably what you're looking at here. They're just not going to listen in spite of whatever it is. They said, because the Lord would slay them. And this is a statement that is coming later, remember. When Samuel writes this is years after these events. And so he includes this point in here. The Lord is going to slay them. And that's what's going to, it would be years later, but that was going to happen, and eventually will. Verse 26, and now the story's kind of going back and forth here. The child Samuel grew on, was in favor both with the Lord and also with the men. That's a kind of familiar statement, isn't it? Normally regarding who? Jesus. Luke 2:52, you might remember. And Jesus grew in stature and in wisdom and in favor with God and man. So you got four aspects of growth that take place here. And so you're seeing this, I think, also in connection with Samuel. A little bit different from the two other fellows that are the sons of Eli. Others would, I'm sure, in their coming to the tabernacle, would see how the young boy or the young lad at this time was behaving, his dedication to what he was doing, and his dedication to the Lord during this time. And then that would be held in stark contrast to these sons of Eli. Verse 27. And there came a man of God unto Eli, and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord. And of course, now what he's doing is he's speaking in behalf. In other words, the Lord's saying this, and it's through the mouth of this man. Did I plainly appear unto the house of thy father when they were in Egypt in Pharaoh's house? Now, that may not seem to have a great deal to do with all this, but when you kind of go through it, you kind of see it. Eli was actually, I really should have put this where I could get it on the board. You might want to write some of this down because it'll help you understand a little bit about what all is happening here. Eli was actually a descendant of Ithamar. Now, while that may not mean a lot to you, he was the fourth son of Aaron, which means he had another brother that was around, and which was Eleazar, and then their brothers were Nadab and Abihu. So they died. They got killed by God. So you had Ithamar and Eleazar. Well, Eli is actually a descendant of Ithamar. Now, this is where things get interesting. God had chosen Eleazar and his descendants to be the lineage of the high priest. Okay? After the death of Nadab and Abihu, one of them was evidently the oldest, and one of them, most likely, probably Nadab, would have been the one that would have ended up being the high priest, except for the fact that they misbehaved and that cost them. So God had chosen Eleazar to be the one through whom the high priest was going to come. But here's where things kind of get interesting too. The promise of the lineage has always been based or contingent upon the faithfulness of that lineage to God. Now, at some point in time, there's evidently been some problem in this respect, because the point of the line of the high priest had been moved to Ithamar. And that now, when you start looking at the situation regarding Eli's sons now, Eli is now told, which is what you're going to be seeing here, that line is going to return back to Eleazar. That this is what the sense of all this is. Eli is in the position of being high priest because at some point in time in the past, whoever it was that was of the lineage of Eleazar did not hold toward that faithfulness toward God as well. So the line ends up moving to Ithamar. And now, because of the behavior of Eli's sons, it's going to go back to Eleazar. Are you getting the point now? So this is part of that judgment that he's talking about. It's the line of Eli is no longer going to be used in context with being the high priest anymore. Now, we don't know who this fella is that's come to him. He's mentioned as a man of God. This too is a little bit interesting, and I'm not going to try to get ahead of ourselves in this as well, because when you start getting again into chapter 3 and matters regarding the position that Samuel is ultimately going to take, he is one of the first, if not one of the first, since the days of Moses, to really be one chosen as a spokesman for God. But like I say, I'm not going to get ahead of myself. I'm just going to throw that out there to you at this present time. So it's kind of interesting that you got somebody at this point that at least is the mouthpiece of God at this time for this particular purpose. He's not named, and to our knowledge, he's not used again. So it's just for this purpose that this is something's going to be done. The original indicates the fact that he is a prophet, at least in this situation. But as to whether he's one that would have been a perpetual noted prophet of some sort, you would think he would at least be named. And but he's not. So just kind of interesting. Question on that, comment?
He's also been an angel.
You wonder? That has that possibility. Of course, I think is the original suggests that there's a prophet, but that too could have been something along that line. Makes you wonder, because he'd use those too, especially in certain circumstances. Yeah, and then especially ones. Some bug around here won't leave my nose alone. That he would use in certain situations and unnamed, and so that may have some value to that particular point. And of course, now he continues, God's still speaking through him. And did I choose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest to offer up upon mine altar, to burn incense, to wear an ephod before me, and did I give unto the house of thy father all the offerings made by fire of the children of Israel. So the prophet's asking him some questions, which Eli knew the answers. I think he understands the point right here. Eli had allowed this behavior to persist to a point, and he was responsible for all the failures. And when the prophet speaks of Eli's father, actually he's referring to Aaron. That's who, because this was back in Egypt. That's the time period when he's noting that. And as noted, as we just got through pointing out, the lineage was going through Eliezer, but there had been some determination by the Lord that all this has been altered. And now, especially with these boys, they have profaned the position that they've had. So this is something with that line is going to end. Verse 29. The Lord's continue. Wherefore kick ye at my sacrifice and at my offering, which I have commanded in my habitation, and honorest thy sons above me, to make yourselves fat with the chiefest of all the offerings of the Israel of my people. Oh, now when the Lord is speaking to him, it's involving him particularly, and really what he had been up to here, because this is a rather significant blow right here. Eli was not the one necessarily profaning the tabernacle, but what?
Benefiting from it.
He was benefiting from it. He allowed it all to happen. So he's the one that's responsible. He is the high priest. And so the Lord here is charging Hophni and Phinehas with the one, they're kicking the Lord's blessings, and Eli is the one that's benefiting. Basically, kickbacks. So whatever is coming, he's been skimming and been getting all of this, and of course, he's not done much work himself. He's just gotten fat off of it all. So while Hophni and Phinehas were personally benefiting from their privilege too, Eli was getting his portion above what was due him. That's really the point there. So in simple terms, Eli and his sons were placing their own needs and their wants above the service of the Lord's people. And so that's what the Lord's charging him with at this time. What you are doing, you have allowed the abuse of the tabernacle, the place of worship. And what that amounts to is you have a greater honor for your sons and allowing them to carry on this activity than you do me. If you thought anything about me and really truly honored me, this wouldn't have been happening. So that's how this prophet's putting him. So it's kind of like, all right, just in case you happen to be dozing off here, Eli, he slaps him in the face. That maybe this will get your attention. In verse 30, wherefore the Lord God of Israel saith, I said indeed that thy house and the house of thy father should walk before me forever. But now, so the Lord's position is changed with him. Now the Lord saith, be it far from me. For them that honor me will I honor, and they that despise me shall be lightly esteemed. Now, that would be one thing that you really would not want to hear from the Lord. But it's being told him specifically right here. You know, he's reminding Eli the promise that was made to Aaron, and which would have been continued, supposed to have been continued to Eliezer, as we pointed out, but that had been averted to Ithamar and had been now allowed to continue. But the Lord has now placed condition on who's going to serve in this capacity, and that condition had not been met. And so he's going to remove this line from the high priesthood. And so he reiterates that condition right here, that you honor me, I honor you. You despise me, you'll be despised. And so that's where that situation sits here. But continues, verse 31, behold, the days come, I will cut off thine arm and the arm of thy father's house, that there shall not be an old man in thy house. You might remember, it's been years so ago, whenever, a little over a year ago, I'm sure, when we were in study of the human body. Remember, we were talking about the arm, the significance of the arm, particularly the right arm, the right hand. You know, that this was something of great significance that you read about within the scriptures. And it's used here in context with what would be considered then as well as source of strength, which would have been progeny on down the road down here as well. And this is something that's going to be removed. The day is coming when your descendants are going to be cut off from the high priesthood. It would, in fact, last for a while, because Eli's line is going to continue until David's old age. So it's going to be around for a little bit. But Abiathar, if you go down through some of the times when you go to David's day, there was the high priest then was Abiathar, and that was, of course, of Ithamar's lineage itself. He was of the lineage of Eli. And but here's the problem. You might remember the situation in David's day. When David was old, he was kind of in a position where he was sickly in his old age. And you remember he had a son that kind of, in fact, set himself up as king. Adonijah. Remember Adonijah? Absalom, of course, had already been killed. But remember, Adonijah set himself up to be the king. You know, he's already assumed all of this. And remember, Bathsheba, David's wife, came to him and says, did you make Adonijah king? And David, of course, I'm sure says, oh, well, he's already set himself up that, and you'd already told me that Solomon, my son, was going to be the one king. He said, that's exactly right. Well, Adonijah is setting himself up as king. So David said, well, we need to rectify this. Now, here's what the situation was. The high priest at that time was Abiathar, and he aligned himself with Adonijah. That didn't go over well. And when Adonijah presumed himself to be David's heir. So what David did, he got Zadok, and he's going to end up being the high priest, and it was going to be his lineage that would end up being the others that would be the high priest. And Zadok, of course, is of Eliezer's lineage. That's 1 Chronicles chapter 6. You can check that if you like. But what David does then is he gets Zadok, who's actually of Eliezer's lineage, which is actually the lineage that God was wanting anyway. But David takes advantage of it. He gets Zadok. You get my mule, my donkey. You put Solomon on it, carry him off over this area, and you anoint him king. And he did. And there was this great celebration and all this. And while the great celebration, the sounds and all this were going off, Adonijah happens to hear what's going on, what's happening. We're going to go to find out. And of course, he comes to find out Solomon has been anointed king by Zadok. And then he starts looking to save himself from Solomon. You remember how all that worked out, but it didn't do well as far as Adonijah was concerned later. But anyway, it would end up being from that point, here's where the end of Eli's lineage, as far as the Ithamar's line, would have stopped right there. And so from that point, it's going to be returning back to Eliezer, where the line of the priest was going to be, high priest was going to be taking place. And so the point also of his statement that you're seeing here in verse 31, there shall not be an old man in thy house. What does that indicate? Yeah. Hophni and Phinehas are not going to live very long. So that is something that's eventually going to occur. Well, let's see. Yeah, we got another minute or two. So we go to verse 32. And thou shalt see an enemy in my habitation. And this is against what he's being told by this prophet. Thou shalt see an enemy in my habitation. In all the wealth which God shall give Israel, there shall not be an old man in thine house forever. So he's repeated that particular point. But the prophecies made to Eli was, there's going to be enemy in his habitation, meaning what? Yep. When you start looking at it, you realize eventually it's going to be the Philistines. They're going to be raiding what? The tabernacle. Yep. They will be in his habitation. So the Philistines are going to be in the house, the tabernacle. They're going to invade that. They're going to raid it. And they did later. They would defeat Israel. Remember, they took the ark away. And so it's noted here again that his sons would not live to be an old man. Now, we kind of put this in a little bit of perspective. We can touch on this before we close. Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 18. This is a passage I know you're probably familiar with. Ezekiel chapter 18. Let's look at verse 20. Because it tells just a little bit of a story about the situation with how people kind of view situations with children that sin and things of this nature. But his whole point with Ezekiel 18 and 20, the Lord makes this point: the soul that sinneth, it shall die. The son shall not bear the iniquity of the father, neither the father bear the iniquity of the son. The righteous of the righteous shall be upon him, and the righteousness of the righteous shall be upon him, and the wickedness of the wicked be upon him. Now, when you look at that text and think of it in respect of what we're studying here with Eli and Hophni and Phinehas, what conclusions do you draw? Okay. You're responsible for your actions. So we know what the actions of Hophni and Phinehas were, and that they were not going to be old men. They're going to die. We've already seen where prophecy has been given from Samuel regarding the text regarding Hophni and Phinehas, that God's going to slay them. The sons are not responsible for the sins of the father, and the father's not responsible for the sins of the son, but yet who all's being punished? All of them. Every one of them. And you note in the text it mentions there, the soul that sinneth, it shall die. So it has made it very clear, even where Eli is concerned, he's in a sinful condition because of what he's allowed. And that doesn't speak well of him. And it's still interesting to me that even Hannah, perhaps if she knew a lot of this, you still wonder as to whether or not she would have brought him. But perhaps at this particular point in time, it is this situation that finally registers on Eli. I need to address this issue. But he still didn't do it like he ought to have. And there's really the foundation of the problem. His sin was to indulge his sons, and that just doesn't work out very well. Well, we'll stop right there. Because what we're going to see now is you're seeing the depth of the judgment against Eli's descendants that are going to come. So we'll kind of note that. It's all kind of interesting, isn't it? When you start looking how God has operated in such fashion like this, but you still see the typical nature, do you not, of how man behaves. You know, there's a lot of things in here you may have difficulty in understand how people could do the things that they do, like Eli would and did, but we see it every day. And and none of it ever turns out well. That's what's, we have kind of tuned ourselves to thinking that somehow or another, we're going to be able to get beyond that or overcome that, or, it's not going to happen to me, that kind of thing. But never works out well. So it's just kind of interesting. 217. Number 217. I get a bit amazed that listen to people nowadays. Of course, I'm guilty of it as well. We start talking about the weather a great deal, especially the extremes of it and things of this nature, the heat, and they wish it would be cooler, and wasn't just a few months ago. In fact, the matter is, I think it was 6 months ago, there were people down on the coast that were snowed in. And so it just doesn't seem like it's been all that long ago that we were freezing cold and wishing it would warm up. And a lot of this is simply because of the fact that we're never satisfied, it seems, with the circumstances which we, it's always something to be a little bit better or to be more to my liking. We like it more to my liking, what's more convenient for me. Never really come to the realization, it seems, that life and the existence of it, as far as the world's concerned, doesn't revolve around what we like. It's just a matter of our learning how to adapt to whatever the situations may be. Looking at this from a spiritual vantage point, there's a lot of people that deal with religion, and their faith is based upon what they like. It's not so much of what God says, which is, there is your spiritual norm. There is establishment of your type. But yet men are not so satisfied with that. So they want to complain about what may be seen in the scriptures as, at least by the interpretation of some. This is how they'll dismiss things. If the truth is there, then some people will dismiss it. Well, that's the way that you interpret it, but that's not the way that I do it, because it's not the way that I like. And that they will excuse the manner of their living, as I may have used something of this nature before. They will state something along this line: I think God wants me to be happy, and if this is what makes me happy, then that's the way I'm going to have it. Don't you wish you could do the weather that way? Yeah. But it doesn't. And since you can't change that, even though there's some people that think they can, you're not going to be able to change God's law either. It is what it is. And it's not going to change. I am the Lord, I change not. My will and my word is going to be that the heavens and earth pass away, but my word's not. It's going to remain. It's going to be the very thing, John 12:48, that's going to judge us. And so we'll either have to adapt to that, or if we don't, then we will eternally perish. And that's how it is. So like Judy at the present time, she's adapting to the warm weather. She's fanning. That's what you might do as far as the world or the earth is concerned. You adapt. But where the truth is concerned, it doesn't adapt to us. We have to adopt or adapt to it. So we have to accept it as it is and then carry it out. If you're here this evening and have not obeyed the gospel, you have an opportunity to do so. Those, again, as we note and try to make the effort to note to those in our live stream audience that perhaps if you realize your unsaved condition and want some help about rectifying your situation, please let us know how that we might be able to assist you. But if you're here and need to obey him, the invitation song that we sing, number 217, is here to encourage you, or as one who has erred and needs to reconcile with his maker because of sin, then you need to do that while we stand, while we sing our song.
Why did the Savior
heaven leave and come to heavenly home, where men His grace would not receive, because He loves me so. He loves me, He loves me, He loves me, this I know. He gave Himself to die for me, because He loves me so. Why did the gardens tremble, rose white through His trials home? Why suffer death upon the cross, because He loves me so? He loves me, He loves me, He loves me, this I know. He gave Himself to die for me, because He loves me so.
Again, it's good to see you. Don't forget our services Sunday, 9, 10, and 11. Encourage others to come and to be with us then. I do believe this is the fourth Sunday. I think that's coming up. So do bear that in mind. We'll have our singing in the second session and our fellowship following that. So make your plans to be here. It's a good occasion to be able to encourage others to come as well. So they might be able to fellowship with us. So be mindful of that. Check the board. Let's see. What is today? This is the 22nd, 23rd. Well, let's see. Those meetings have already passed. So there was the one at Liberty, and then there was the BBS. So I haven't gotten any information on any others right at the present time. I'm sure there'll be one coming. The fact of the matter is, I do know if they're still holding on to theirs, that'd be the one at Gum that will be taking place first Sunday in August. But any others right at the present time, I'm not aware. Do not forget the summer series at Belmont on Thursday nights at 6:30. I'll be there tomorrow night at 6:30. And so if you have an interest in that, you might go. If you don't, I guess that'd be okay. If nobody comes, I'm going to use that lesson Sunday here. So if not, if somebody's up there, then I may just have to change that. So you're going to make me work one way or the other. If nothing else, then we'll be dismissed. Tavon, you think you can dismiss us? Try that? Okay. Do it, bud.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us all to be here tonight. Please help us as we depart. Please bless the people that are sick. Please help them get together, Lord, and get their health better, Lord. Just say amen.
Bet.
Well, I'm